Alright everyone, welcome back. Preview for Mod 17 had an update today, which changes quite a bit about healing for Paladins and Clerics. Now this is a bit of a small sad for me to talk about, because healing as a Paladin at least was pretty fun for me. I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm not saying that I'm just all of a sudden not going to enjoy it anymore, but the changes that were made are going to require you to pay more attention, specifically on Cleric, but a Paladin as well. Pay more attention to your divinity and what you're using and when you're using it. And of course I'm going to go over everything that was changed. I originally wasn't planning on doing any videos about the updates that go on preview, but in this case this is something that I think really needs to be touched on because it affects PvP, PvE, especially because of how important healing is now. So without further ado, I'm just going to talk about what was changed. So to start off with, I know some people were concerned that the Tower of the Mad Mage appeared in the random advanced queue. That was not intentional, and it's not going to be a part of any random queues yet, but they will make an announcement whenever that's actually going to happen. So you don't have to worry about getting thrown in there with random people, because the devs have said so themselves. They don't believe that a group of randoms has any chance of success in there, and honestly, I would agree with that. Hey, there's stones down there now. That used to be collision cubes. I knew something looked a little different in here. Also, on the strain of Tower of the Mad Mage, while we're talking about that, some of his powers were adjusted to deal unavoidable damage, meaning you can't be dodged. You can't dodge it, and you can't avoid it using Fox's Cunning either. And Fox's Cunning was also nerfed as well for Rangers, and I will, of course, get into that, so calm down, people. Alright, now let's start talking about the things that are actually going to apply in combat into the various different classes, since I know that's what you all actually care about. So the distance for combat advantage was increased to 85 feet. Now, in case you didn't know, previously combat advantage only applied up to, I think, 20 feet or something like that. So if you're a ranged class and you were standing more than 20 feet away, you wouldn't be getting any sort of combat advantage damage bonus or anything like that. So this is increased to 85 feet, so you can now actually stand at a ranged distance and make use of things that increase your damage the further you are away, and also get the combat advantage damage. So Fox's Cunning, going back to that, is no longer a guaranteed dodge, and instead it just increases your damage reduction, which is definitely something that is going to be noticeable if you use that. Hey, it's Northside. Hi, Northside. Healing was reduced in PvP. That was sort of what was messing with PvP, how strong healing was, and that has been adjusted, so you will not be able to heal as much in PvP anymore. So, you should try out PvP and tell me what you think about it now. Okay? On to healing. The next, 10 minutes, I don't know how long, and the next some amount of time is going to be about healing. So the ratio that they use to determine your critical chance of healing has been adjusted. So critical strike now increases the chance to land a critical heal more, which makes critical strike more important for heal. I mean, it was already important before, so honestly I'm not really sure how the change actually works. But the way I'm reading it is critical strike is now more important for determining if you would land a critical heal. I don't know if this means you should be overcapping your crit, or if you should just try to cap it and leave it at that. I don't know. I'm not that smart. Maybe somebody who's actually smart can answer that in the comments. That would be really helpful. Now let's talk about Cleric first. Devout healing Clerics is not something that I really messed around with at all in Mod 16. Or Mod 17, I guess, but I have heard a lot of people saying that it's difficult to maintain your divinity at a reasonable level, but I've also heard some other people saying it's easy, and that the people who find it hard are dumb, and that's just sort of how people are, if something is hard to somebody else, it's going to be easy to somebody else, so, there's always going to be that, two sides of the spectrum kind of thing. For both Paladins and Clerics, the cost of healing powers, the divinity cost, has been increased and their magnitudes have been decreased for a lot of them. This applies to Bastion of Health, Cleansing Light, Healing Word, and Intercession. Couldn't think of that last one, the big ultra mega heal. Alright, so I should be on my Cleric when I'm talking about this, but I really don't feel like changing characters, so instead I'm just going to sleep on the floor. So like I said, Bastion of Health had its divinity cost increased by 20, and its magnitude was reduced by 50, so it's not a huge change, but it's something that's probably going to be noticeable once you start getting into those longer fights and things where divinity management really becomes important. Same thing with Cleansing Light. Its divinity cost was increased by 10, also pretty minor change. Divine Armor's heal over time divinity cost thingy has been increased to 15 seconds instead of the 12 seconds. Then we have Healing Word. Its divinity cost was increased by 40, and its heal over time magnitude effect has been increased by 50, so it's 250 now. And then its original magnitude has been decreased by 100, but its radius has been increased to 80 instead of 40. I think this is something to do with how Combat Advantage now has a wider range, so this sort of healing AoE heal has to have a longer range because people are going to be playing further away from the group, theoretically. And then lastly, for Cleric, Intercession's magnitude was reduced by 400, so that's a pretty large change, but it's still a really large heal, 1600 magnitude instead of 2000. Still really big, but smaller than before. It didn't have a cooldown change or anything like that, like some of the other stuff did. So now let's talk about Paladin. There is actually a mistake in the Paladin patch notes that I noticed here. The divinity cost of Divine Touch has been increased, but it says in 2 different places that it has been increased, but the number in the first one is incorrect. Originally, when I saw this, it says the divinity cost of Divine Touch has been increased to 140 instead of 80, and that is a huge increase and would really make healing actually kind of more challenging. Like, it doesn't sound like it, but then you get into the longer fights where you're using Divine Touch constantly, and you realize, oh, I'm running out of divinity a lot faster. So anyway, it was not increased to 140, it was increased to 100, which is similar to Cleric's Bastion of Health being increased to 100 from 80. So it does cost more, but only a little bit more, and honestly, I'm okay with this part of the change, because you could basically use it constantly. And since the shield was, you know, pretty OP, it was really easy to heal as a paladin. And I still think it's going to be easy, don't get me wrong. However, this is the part that's going to make a huge difference in paladin healing. The magnitude of Divine Touch has been decreased to 350 instead of 500, so that's a 150 magnitude decrease, so the heals that you're going to be getting from that are not going to be as strong, and so consequently the shielding you're going to be getting from that is not going to be as strong either, because as you know, the Divine Barrier shield is based on the number that you heal for, so I don't know if we're going to be seeing full health bar shields anymore. I mean, we still probably could. I have not tested this out. I want to just disclaimer, I have not tested any of this yet. This is just my initial impression of the things that have been changed. And this change is one that is definitely on my oh no list. Like things that raise alarm bells in your head when you read them, that's one of them. Divine Shelter, oh, that's not Divine Shelter. Divine Shelter was also touched. It had its divinity cost increased to 180 instead of 120, and its magnitude was increased to 400. So this one actually got a buff. It costs a little bit more, but it does more healing. It actually has a higher magnitude than Divine Touch does now, which honestly makes sense because Divine Shelter made no sense at all to use before because it was more expensive to use than Divine Touch and did less healing, but otherwise did the exact same thing. So it was kind of weird. So I'm glad that this was made stronger, at least, because it at least makes sense when you look at it now. And the only difference between the two is that you get to target Divine Touch, and Divine Shelter is just sort of an area around you that has a radius of 80 feet. Cleansing Touch had its divinity cost increase a little bit also, which is no big deal because this isn't something that you use very often unless you're, you know, having issues. And then, lastly, but not leastly, we have Circle of Power. Circle of Power is also changed. I don't think it's called Circle of Power anymore. That's something, it's still mentioned as Circle of Power, but it's called Circle of Divinity in the actual preview right now, which I guess makes sense because it increases divinity. However, the actual divinity restoring effect has been reduced, so you're going to be getting less divinity than you did previously, which kind of sucks, because I noticed that it was giving you more divinity than the Sacred Weapon thing did, and that made me sad. Well, actually, it made me happy because, you know, it was easier to heal, but it being nerfed kind of makes me sad. It had its cooldown increased to 30 seconds. It doesn't show here because I have ability scores, you know, Charisma, that reduces your cooldowns, so it's going to show slightly lower on here, and then it's also had its duration decrease to 12 seconds instead of 16 seconds. However, in-game, it still shows as 16 seconds. So let's see if it actually is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so that was about 12 seconds. However, it's still listed in the tooltip as 16, so that's another typo in-game that will probably be fixed at some point. Alright, so that is all about the Paladin changes, except for the Sigil of the Paladin, which had its damage reduction and healing values adjusted. So now it gives you 15% increased damage resistance for everyone who stands in it and healed over time. I don't know if that's any stronger. I don't know what adjusted means. I wish it could be more specific. Like, was it increased or was it decreased? So, I mean, it didn't feel very strong, so I would hope it was increased. I never really used it, except when we were testing the new trial, because, you know, it was a little bit more healing that would help. I hope it was increased. I don't know. Alright, that's all for the healing aspect of this, so just to sum it up, healing was nerfed in the sense that the healing-related powers for Cleric and Paladin that are the most popular had their magnitudes decreased for the most part, and their costs increased. Warlock was not touched, which is interesting. In a sense, it brings them all closer together, because Cleric and Paladin were obviously a lot better healers than Warlock, but I wish Warlock could have had their heal over time increased at least a little bit. It would have been nice, or at least give us a bit more of a burstier heal option. Now, the last couple things that I want to touch on is Wizard. Wizard had a little bit of a nerf. The damage of repel has been reduced. It's now 375 magnitude instead of 475, so that's like almost 25% less damage, which is going to suck for them, because repel is weirdly the most highest source of damage for wizards, or at least the power that deals the most damage, and it was reduced, so all you people who wanted a wizard nerf, there you go. And also for the wizard and the arcanist, Paragon, Disintegrate's magnitude has been increased, so while repel will do less damage, Disintegrate is going to do more damage, so there's that. And that covers everything that was changed in the patch today. Well, almost everything. There was a couple things I skipped over because they weren't as important for the topic of this video. There's now a bunch of lore in here. I can read books all day. I don't like when there's something in the world that I can't go inside. Thank you guys for watching or listening. I'm assuming you listened instead of watched, because there wasn't really much to see here. I'm just running around in circles in Stardock. As always, I appreciate it. If you liked the video, make sure to give me your thumb. Add it to my thumb collection. Do you know how much easier life would be if you had 5 thumbs? I'm interested to see how these changes affect the Tower of the Mad Mage, because healing is so important there. Making it a little bit more difficult for our healers to heal will ultimately change how the runs are going to go. Now, leave a comment, tell me what you think about these changes, or if you've tested any of them out, let me know how they feel. And as always, I don't know where I was going with that. As always, smile and enjoy your dinner. Bye!